If you've ever met someone who walks into a room like they already own the place, Julius Caesar was that, except the room was the Roman Republic. And here's the thing people miss. Caesar didn't only win with swords, he won with timing, image, and story control. He didn't just do history, he edited history while it was happening, then convinced everyone else they'd watched the official version. Today is Caesar as a person, the ambitious aristocrat who nearly drowned in debt, the political operator who could charm enemies, the general who fought brutal wars, and the leader whose mercy could feel like a threat. Because Caesar's secret weapon wasn't just genius, it was that he made the future feel inevitable, and made himself look like the only man who could deliver it. Let's rewind before the legions and the marble statues. Young Caesar is born into the Julii, a prestigious patrician family with old blood and ancient bragging rights. Great for the name, not always great for the bank account. In Rome, noble status opens doors, but money keeps them open, and politics is expensive in a way that sounds oddly modern. If you want public love, you pay for public spectacle. Games, festivals, distributions, favors, help for friends. Rome runs on relationships and showmanship as much as laws. Caesar learns early that reputation is a currency you can spend, and he spends it like a man who believes he's going to make it back later with interest. He also grows up in a violent era. Roman politics isn't polite debate, it's intimidation, street clashes, and in the worst years, purges. When Sulla takes power as dictator, Caesar is ordered to divorce his wife Cornelia. Caesar refuses. That's not just romantic stubbornness, it's a personality reveal. Caesar has a deep allergy to being controlled. He would rather risk destruction than accept being made smaller. He flees, survives, returns, and comes back with a dangerous lesson. The state can be terrifying, but it isn't all-powerful. If you're bold enough and connected enough, you can slip out of its grip. But then comes the trap that almost buries him: debt. To climb the Roman career ladder, you have to spend. Caesar spends extravagantly. He sponsors games, courts popularity, builds networks, and it works. The crowd notices, powerful patrons notice, but he racks up obligations so heavy that at points his next step depends on someone else guaranteeing his future. This is where Caesar's mind starts to harden into what it becomes later. When you're already one shove away from ruin, you stop playing safe. Retreat doesn't feel like caution, retreat feels like death. So Caesar becomes comfortable living on the edge, because the edge is where his whole career exists. And then comes one of the most famous stories about him, not because it's cute, but because it's revealing. Caesar is traveling and gets captured by pirates. Imagine that, the future ruler of Rome held hostage by criminals on the sea. Most prisoners panic. Most bargain. Caesar allegedly does something else. He treats the pirates like they've made an embarrassing mistake. They demand a ransom. Caesar tells them they're undervaluing him and insists they ask for more. He jokes, he acts annoyed, like the world has paused for a minor inconvenience. And he keeps telling them, repeatedly, that once he's free, he's coming back to punish them. They laugh because it sounds like bravado. Then Caesar is released, raises forces, hunts them down, and makes good on the threat. Whether every detail is perfect or polished by later storytellers, the shape of it fits the man we see again and again. Caesar doesn't just talk, he commits, and then he expects reality to obey. Back in Rome, Caesar climbs through offices and he becomes extremely good at a skill that wins political wars. Making people feel like helping him is in their interest. He remembers names, he plays the social game. He gives people what they want, sometimes entertainment, sometimes influence, sometimes protection. He cultivates popularity with the crowd because the crowd is a force the elite fear. But he also knows popularity isn't enough. In Rome, you can be loved by thousands and still be destroyed by a few dozen powerful enemies. So Caesar does what ambitious Romans do. He builds an alliance with other giants. This becomes known as the First Triumvirate: Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. It's not a magical brotherhood, it's a political business deal. Pompey has enormous military prestige. Crassus has huge wealth. Caesar has connections, charm, and sharp instincts. And Caesar is the key link, the one who can stitch together two men who don't naturally trust each other. Now Caesar gets his stage, command in Gaul. This is where the story becomes dangerous for Rome, because Gaul gives Caesar two things that transform an ambitious politician into a historical earthquake. First, it gives him victory, years of campaigns, battlefield successes, expansion of Roman control, and the kind of prestige that turns a name into a brand. But second, and more important, Gaul gives him an army that becomes loyal to him personally, not just loyal to Rome, loyal to Caesar, loyal to the man who leads them, rewards them, and survives with them. And Caesar doesn't waste this opportunity. He writes about his campaigns in a style that sounds calm and authoritative. It's not just reporting, it's narrative shaping. He makes his decisions look necessary. He makes his victories look earned. He makes his enemies look unreasonable. While he's fighting in the field, he's also fighting a second war, the war for how Rome will remember what he's doing. This is one of the most human interest parts of Caesar. He's not only a general, he's a self-publisher. He's building his legend in real time. But Gaul also exposes his ruthlessness. These wars involve harsh punishments, forced displacement, slavery, and mass killing. Caesar can be personally charming and politically merciful, but as a commander, he is extremely effective at violence. It's a reminder that Roman greatness and Roman brutality often come in the same package, and Caesar is a master of that package. Back in Rome, senators watch this and feel the temperature rising. A successful general with a loyal army is one of the most frightening things the Republic can produce, because the Republic is built on a delicate balance. No one man should dominate. But conquest creates wealth and armies create men who stop accepting limits. Caesar's enemies try to force him into a corner, give up his command, return as a private citizen, and face legal threats without the protection of his office and army. Caesar knows what that means. In Rome, losing political cover can mean prosecution, humiliation, exile, even death. So Caesar comes to the decision that becomes legend. He crosses the Rubicon, a boundary commanders aren't supposed to cross with troops, and in doing so, he turns the political struggle into civil war. And here's the crucial point. Caesar doesn't frame it as, "I'm taking over." He frames it as necessity, as defense, as justice. He presents himself as the man forced into action by corrupt enemies. His opponents call him a tyrant. Caesar calls himself a protector. That battle of narratives matters because Rome is splitting into sides, and people need a story that makes their side feel righteous. Pompey becomes the figurehead for senatorial resistance. Caesar becomes the challenger who refuses to be contained. The Republic is about to find out what happens when its rules collide with a man who treats rules like obstacles. And now we hit the part that makes Caesar genuinely chilling. Even as he wins, he starts using a weapon that doesn't look like a weapon at first: mercy. Because once Caesar begins defeating Roman enemies, often he chooses not to massacre them. He pardons, he restores, he lets men live who expected to die. In a normal story, this would be noble, but in Roman political culture, mercy can be its own kind of domination. If Caesar defeats you and then graciously lets you live, he isn't just saving you, he's reminding you that your life is in his hands. Some men become grateful, others feel humiliated. Some others quietly decide that no one should have the power to spare them. And that's where we'll pick up in the second half, because Caesar's mercy, his rising honors, and one scandalous relationship turn fear into conspiracy. So Caesar wins the civil war, and now comes the question Rome can't avoid. What does victory mean when one man's power is bigger than the system that's supposed to control it? Caesar moves quickly after victory. He doesn't just sit on a throne. In fact, Rome doesn't even have a throne in the Republican sense. He runs the state through titles, offices, appointments, and personal authority. He reorganizes debts, resettles veterans, expands the Senate, and tries to stabilize a city that's been shaken by years of political violence and war. Some of this is practical governance. Rome is messy, and Caesar is undeniably effective at making things happen. But some of it alarms the old elite because Caesar isn't merely fixing problems, he's centralizing power, moving major decisions closer and closer to himself. He accepts honors and visibility that make him look less like a citizen and more like a permanent feature of the state. And Rome has a deep cultural allergy to kings. The Republic's foundational pride is that it threw out kings long ago. King is not just a title, it's an insult, a nightmare, the thing you accuse someone of when you're warning the public that liberty is in danger. So when Caesar starts accumulating exceptional privileges, public honors, special status, larger-than-life symbolism, the nervous question spreads. Is he building a monarchy in everything but name? Now, here's where the human interest detail matters. Caesar doesn't behave like a man trying to look modest. He behaves like a man who believes the old system is too small for what Rome has become, and too small for what he intends to do. Some people admire that. Others feel it as a threat to their entire identity. The Roman aristocracy doesn't just want power, it wants the right kind of power, power shared among peers. Caesar's dominance implies a world where they become secondary. And then Caesar's mercy returns as a political boomerang. Remember those pardons? Caesar lets many former enemies live. It looks magnanimous. It also creates a dangerous pool of men who owe their lives to Caesar's choice. In some cases, that builds loyalty. In other cases, it builds resentment, because being spared can feel like being marked, like wearing an invisible collar that says, "I exist because Caesar allowed it." There's a harsh irony here. Clemency can be a tool of peace, but it can also be a tool of control. And people who feel controlled don't always respond with gratitude. Now add the most famous political relationship in ancient history, Cleopatra. Cleopatra isn't just a romantic figure. She's a queen of Egypt, a serious political player, and she's fighting for her own throne. Caesar's involvement with her is strategic as much as personal. Cleopatra needs Roman support. Caesar wants stability, money, and influence in the East. But politics doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in public imagination. Cleopatra's presence around Caesar, and the rumors surrounding it, hits Rome like a thunderclap. A foreign queen in the orbit of Rome's strongest man creates fear, fascination, and gossip all at once. And if Cleopatra bears Caesar a child, Caesarion, it triggers the most explosive question possible. Is Caesar building a dynasty? Even if Caesar never intended to wear a crown, the optics start to look like the blueprint for monarchy. A towering leader, extraordinary honors, international alliances, and the possibility of a hereditary line. To many senators, that's not just different politics, that's the end of the world they grew up believing in. And this is where Caesar makes a mistake that powerful men often make. He begins to treat danger like it's already defeated. He's survived enemies, war, and crisis. He may start believing he can survive anything. He continues to move through Rome with confidence that borders on inevitability. Meanwhile, a group of senators is quietly deciding that the Republic cannot coexist with Caesar. They call themselves liberators. They tell themselves they're saving liberty. Some genuinely believe that, but there's also something else in their motivation: fear and humiliation. Fear that Caesar will become king in everything but name, and humiliation that they've become spectators in a game they thought they owned. So they plan murder. And then comes the Ides of March. Caesar goes to the Senate. The conspirators close in. Knives flash, and the most powerful man in Rome is stabbed to death in a place that symbolizes law, debate, and the state itself. The assassins expect, or hope, that by removing Caesar they can restore the Republic, that the old rules will snap back into place, that the system will breathe again. But this is where history turns savage, because Caesar isn't just a man at this point, he's a reality. He's the proof that Rome's institutions can't contain the power Rome has created. Killing him doesn't revive the old order, it shows how broken the old order has become. If the Republic requires assassination to function, what kind of legitimacy does it have left? Rome doesn't stabilize after Caesar dies. It fractures further. Power struggles explode. More civil wars follow. And eventually, Augustus rises and builds a new system, a regime that looks republican on the surface but functions like monarchy underneath. In other words, Caesar's assassins don't stop the future, they accelerate it. Now, here's the part that makes Caesar feel modern and unsettling. Caesar's greatest legacy isn't only territorial expansion or even political reform. It's that he understood power is not just something you hold, it's something you perform. He wrote his campaigns into a narrative that made him look calm and necessary. He built popularity through spectacle. He moved fast enough that enemies were constantly reacting. He used mercy not just as kindness, but as leverage. He made the future feel like it had a single path, the path with Caesar at the center. And he did all of that while still being recognizably human, vain enough to care about image, hungry enough to take reckless risks, intelligent enough to see 10 moves ahead, and ruthless enough to destroy obstacles when charm didn't work. That's why Caesar is still worth studying. Not because he's cool or because he has a famous name, but because he's a warning label on political systems. If your system creates massive inequality of power, armies loyal to individuals, wealth concentrated in a few hands, institutions that can't enforce limits, then sooner or later someone will step into that gap, and that someone will tell a story where their takeover feels like destiny. Caesar did it first on Rome's grandest stage, and the world has been replaying variations of it ever since. So, if you enjoyed this deep dive into Julius Caesar, the gambler, the general, and the man who turned the Republic into his arena, please like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments who's next from the list. Because next time, we're following another famous life where one person's ambition doesn't just change history, it changes the rules of the game.